Welcome. It's Monday, March 22nd at 6:10 to the Personnel Committee meeting. To my right is Todd Sievert. To my left is Zach Allen. We're here for a couple recommendations for some hourly rates, part-time salary schedule, longevity benefits, and some sick leave hours. So I guess let's maybe do them one at a time, and then if people have questions on them,
Sure.
and then we can go from there.
All right.
So Patrick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These are some personnel-related recommendations. The first one with regards to Hobart Arena, and that is with the Facility Operator 1 and Facility Operator 2. So approximately 15 years ago, that department, that operation was reorganized. There was an adjustment of the hourly wages in recognition of the fact that while a lot of what they do is similar to what our laborers do in the street department, they do work non-traditional hours, weekends. They are also sometimes in charge of the building after hours because the arena building is open very long hours. At that time, the hourly rates were adjusted so that they were approximately 50 cents an hour greater than the laborers. When 3 years ago we negotiated with AFSCME, the final contract approved a slight increase to the laborer hourly rates. There was not any adjustment that was made in the arena facility operator rate plan. I will say that the arena is a non-union program. AFSCME represents the union employees in the maintenance at the maintenance facility. As we have moved forward and reevaluated continue to evaluate how that program at the arena has evolved, given the level of responsibility and the fact that while union employees have other benefits that non-union sometimes don't have, the fact that they are sometimes in charge of the building, and because they do work non-traditional hours, it's important to readjust those rates. Also, there is, it hasn't been an exorbitant amount of turnover, but in the arena organization, someone may want to start with non-traditional hours, but over time then they want to find opportunities to move up in the overall Troy organization, and there are limited opportunities out at the arena, and so often what they'll do is they will jump over to the maintenance facility, taking a short-term lower pay so that they can train on equipment and learn a lot more to then be qualified to take other promotions, again, that are not available in the arena. That's the Facility Operator 1. There's also a Facility Operator 2 that is a kind of a specialized position. Up until a retirement, there was an incumbent there that had qualifications in maintenance of the HVAC, the boiler equipment, the specialized equipment out at the arena. Despite attempts to recruit, it's difficult, if not impossible, to find somebody to fill that role. There's a significant difference between the 1 and the 2 rate. So in discussing with the rec board chairman and the recreation director, as well as with Mr. Funderburg, we discussed maybe taking that position and leaving it vacant, and instead creating a lead operator position similar to what we have over in the street department, the utilities department, to be able to promote one of the 4 operators into that position. Ultimately, the supervisor over that the entire operation is the operations manager. who anticipates retiring in the next couple of years or so. So there's two positions that ultimately could lead to promotion opportunities. And so restructuring with minimal impact on the budget, because we would collapse the facility operator 2 position. And so, but we think that this is a more relevant organization for today's arena. And we are recommending that you approve those changes.
Okay. Any questions from? Nope. Any questions on this subject from anybody? Any other council members? Okay, pretty straightforward. Next one?
All right, the next one is with regards to the seasonal employee scale. So you, every year, will pass a new ordinance that addresses the part-time seasonal, the general labor pool, temporary seasonal part-time pool, I shouldn't say pool, ranks. And it's because of the annual changes in the minimum wage. In that particular section of the code, there are 9 steps. Those steps do not go high enough, nor do we recommend that we keep adding steps to that general list to allow for appropriate recruitment of temporary seasonals at the shoreline. They have a different market, they have a different candidate pool, candidate list, and so when we looked at the sections of the ordinance, Section 3 is specifically geared towards the recreation department and the swimming pool manager, which is a temporary seasonal. We would recommend that you expand the title between swimming pool manager and add a lead food service part-time employee, and then add 3 steps to that progression so that we can cover the required hourly rate to retain a very, very well qualified employee that we've had.
Okay. Any questions on the seasonal pay scale and adding the lead food service?
Nope. None.
Any questions from other council members?
So, yes.
Mr. Phillips.
Mr. Chair. So there is no, this is strictly pay. This has nothing to do with the comp time situation or accrual of hours that could impinge the budget on a retirement, say, with a huge.
Right, these are part-time, so they don't accumulate
Got
time
it.
like such as sick time and vacation.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
All right. Anybody else? Okay. Next one on longevity.
Longevity is a recommendation that we offer longevity in two different ways to non-union employees. Right now, the union employees are hourly employees, so we have a pool of hourly employees. Say 2/3 of them are covered by, probably more than that, covered by union contracts, and then we have the non-union hourly employees as well. Non-union workers hired after 2004, the longevity provision was eliminated. That provision has remained in the union contracts. To try to get those removed takes quite a bit of negotiation and focus, if you will, and given the very positive tenure with our unions, as well as the timing, that provision was never removed from the union contracts. So that continues, and what we find is that we have non-union hourly employees in similar roles to union employees, and the only difference in pay is that they get longevity. Longevity for union or for hourly employees is 2% for every 5 years of service with the city of Troy. And what that means is if somebody is making $50,000, after 5 years, they get a 2% bump to $51,000. And that's their base for the next 5 years. They don't get 2% every year. The seniority graduation is every 5-year increments. There is no maximum, there's no cap. We have employees that are new enough that they earn 0. We have employees that have worked long enough that they are at 14%, a 37-year employee. So part of this is recommendation is to restore the longevity for the hourly workers. On the salary side, the salary workers are not hourly. They don't earn overtime. They have ranges. Approximately 1/3 of the recent promotions into to management have been from within. And when that happens, a lot of times they have longevity, which they then lose. So they're starting so that they don't lose pay when they start in their promoted position. They often start close to or at the midpoint. And so within 4 or 5 years, they are at the top step. As they stay at the top step and only get the cost of living, and their subordinates receive cost of living plus longevity, over time that can, the gap between the subordinate pay and the management pay is, just almost non-existent for those that are that have any tenure. But recognizing that there is a range that they can slide up, we don't think that it's appropriate that the longevity plan be the same for management and for hourly. Much more limited plan is what's recommended, and that is 2%, but after 10 years, there would also then be a cap at 4%. So somebody with 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, they're capped at 4% longevity. I'm sure I'm missing something, but I'll entertain questions about that one if you have them.
Questions?
I have some, but if you have,
No,
you're the
go
chair.
ahead, you can start.
So a couple questions. Just to follow the math through so I can understand this part. So is it retroactive back? So if you have 15 years of service, do you get a 6% increase or do you get a 2% increase because you've had 5 years?
Well, that's not retroactive, but who are you speaking of? An hourly?
An hourly employee.
An hourly employee who is
Has
15 years
of
in.
service.
They
Do
should
they-
already be receiving it. No, I guess they wouldn't be because that's 2004.
Yeah.
Then they would be at the 6% level.
So it's 2% for every 5 years of service for each existing employee. That's an hourly employee.
Correct.
Okay. And then it's 10% or 2% for every 10 years of every salaried employee for the city.
Correct.
And, with a cap at 4.
Correct. And it is not retroactive to January 1st. It would be whenever is effective, the effective date, that's when this would go into effect.
But you're going to get that percentage for however many years of service you have performed
Yes,
for the city.
your tenure with the city will count.
Right, so,
Correct.
so we're basically reinstating longevity that we got rid of in '04 back to higher date.
Yeah, yes, except they're not going to receive a retroactive check back to that date.
Right, they're
That's
gonna
where-
get that percentage going
It's
forward.
only moving forward.
And
yes.
then every 5 years thereafter, they'll get the 2%.
At every 5-year increment,
So,
yes.
so
5,
we'll
10,
have a
20.
catch-up period. Do we know what that cost of that catch-up period is going
So
to be?
for the rest of
I think it's
21,
64,000.
Oh, is that
it's
in there? I didn't see it.
for the hourly, well, for the hourly and the salary.
It's in here, Patrick, I apologize, I
Well,
didn't see
but I
it.
do want to clarify, because in the letter, or in the memo, I mentioned, and it's not popping out at me either, the budget impact of 64,000. However, that's an annual impact, so for 2021, it's 2/3 of that, assuming, and that's conservative because it wouldn't start April 1st, but, so it's more like 43,000 for this year, between the management and the hourly.
Instead of 64.
Instead, yeah, that's an annual amount, or that's the first full year amount, I should say.
What was the rationale between doing it now? Are we losing people? Is it an incentive? Why?
Well, it's an incentive, and it does retain folks, and you know, what we try to do is the fact that 1/3 of our managers are promoted from within, I haven't done comparisons to other communities, but I think that's a fairly good percentage, and to retain them and to have them step up, the loss of longevity for some tenured employees can be significant.
Do other communities do this?
They have different, everybody does it a little differently, but most, if not all, but most have a seniority type provision.
And administratively, this would be better than bonusing. It looks-
Yes, I would never recommend a bonus structure. I don't even know what you would base that on. Certainly couldn't base it on anything like the private sector.
Yeah, just two more questions. Has Tom, or I guess this is more towards Tom, have you looked through this and do you think this is appropriate from an HR perspective? Okay, and are you concerned that we would lose employees if we don't do something like this?
I think I guess the question is, yes, there's always that potential. At the end of every year when we do performance evaluations is when this becomes most prevalent. We allow our salaried employees to earn their, an increase based off of performance. And many times it's obvious that there are people below them in an hourly category that are earning more in some cases than that salaried manager, because they have either longevity or overtime, but we're not that concerned about overtime. So it does rectify that issue.
And
So that's a
based-
timing standpoint. We've just gone through that process.
And that's based upon the union contract though, right?
Well, that
The
salary,
longevity, the union employee is gonna get longevity because that was negotiated in the union contract.
yes.
And
Yes.
so an hourly employee would not have that right.
If they're non-union, they wouldn't get.
That's what I'm saying.
Right,
I'm
right.
sorry, a non-union hourly employee would not have that right.
Yeah, there really are two issues, as Mr. Tittington referred to with the hourly. There are people sitting right next to a person who's getting 2 or 4 or 6% longevity, and they're doing the same job because we eliminated that for anyone after 2004.
Yeah, or an AFSCME employee versus a person who's working the tax department. If they're not in that, then that would be a different, they're not being treated equally.
True.
So we're gonna balance that treatment out by using this. And then I guess the other question, and I don't see him here, have either one of you discussed budget with the auditor? Is the auditor on board with this? Do we know?
I've had several conversations with John, and we've gone through various iterations and calculations on this, and he is on board with it. he agrees with it, he recommends it, and as far as the budget impact, it is spread over 8 different funds, and he's confident that the budget can handle it.
Okay, so he is in support to the best of both of your
Yes.
knowledge?
Yes.
Okay, I don't have anything further.
Mr. Allen?
Nope.
Anything to add?
I'm good.
Any other councilmen or councilwomen that would be? Okay. Okay, moving
Okay.
to the sick leave.
The sick leave, let me get to that page. All right, so with the pandemic and the initial federal response back in last March, they provided they included a provision, this is prior to the financial contributions that were borrowed on our behalf. They passed a law that non-essential employees would receive 80 hours of COVID pay. That's in addition to any kind of sick leave, disability or whatever pay that an employer offers. The city of Troy, like every municipality in the state, provides at least, in our case it is, but at least 15 days annually of sick pay that is put into the balance in the employee's paycheck, I guess, for use in the event of an illness, an injury, an off-duty injury, or off-the-job injury, or surgery, or something to do with their relatives. In our case, we do not cap the maximum accumulation, so it can continue to build. Our cap, if you will, is if they leave our service, if they resign for some reason, they can, the next employer, the next public employer has to recognize whatever balance they had here, but they do not get paid by the city for that time. If they retire, they do get paid for sick leave at retirement at their full hourly equivalent for the first 1,040 hours, and then a significantly reduced hourly rate for the second 1,040 hours. So it's a fairly generous, but it is, I see your eyes, but it is only for retirees for sick time, not resignations. Vacation we have to pay in any case, but not sick time. We did not provide any COVID hours for the simple fact that in the emergency operations plan, all of our employees are declared as essential personnel. And the law had an exemption, has an exemption for essential personnel that they don't have to get the 80 hours. We wanted to treat everybody the same. We value all of the employees the same way. They're all important in the case of an emergency, and that's why they're declared as essential. Knowing that, we would probably have some cases of employees going out with COVID. We instead tracked those hours, made sure that they had enough sick time to take care of that, and we're waiting for the day that maybe somebody who was newer, didn't have the balance, might need us to do an administrative adjustment or come back to you and do that. Our strategy all along was to track it, wait until the issue starts to wane, which it has significantly, and then come back to you and ask for your consideration to return those hours that an employee used for recovering from COVID. It had to be based on a confirmed test and documentation it is for the employee's positive test, in which case we would restore the sick time that they used, and we would ask that you consider this policy through the end of 2021, just in case there's any lingering cases through the end of the year. There is no budget impact unless a person who gets their time restored then retires, and then they can cash in those hours unless it goes over the 2080 maximum that they can get paid for.
Okay. Any questions?
I do have a question. So is what you just said and what's written here, the employee has to be the positive test?
Correct.
So if you had to quarantine based on a spouse, you lost your time.
You use your sick pay.
You used your sick
Right.
pay.
And we had some that had to do that or chose to do that. We did not require anyone to quarantine just because of suspected contact. If they were symptomatic, then we would encourage a test, and then we would go from there. But again, we tracked all of those hours as well, just to make sure that nobody was left with less than 40 hours pay, and we didn't have anybody that came that had any risk.
No, if we pass this, I just envision people thinking different things. I just wanted to make sure we were specific, and you have to be the positive test. You have to be the employee for the city. If those happen, we'll restore this. You'll be paid. You'll just get it paid out if you retire from here.
Right, you have to have a documented test that says, confirms you were positive. And the other thing I will say is that we would cap the reimbursement, if you will, at 80 hours.
Yeah. Okay. That was going to be my question.
I don't believe we had anybody that used 80 hours for this, but
No recap. Any questions? Any questions from on their council? Bill? Here. Hit.
The mask came down. Come on up.
Did anybody exhaust their leave time
no.
by doing that?
No, we didn't have anybody.
So in the pack, the reference to 43, so the 43 people would get
There are
up to a max of 80?
42
Or-
confirmed at this time. If somebody comes up with it between now and the end of 2021,
Okay,
none of them had 80, none of them used 80 hours.
yes. So, but we're running it through 2021. Because I know the state had a program, and they cut it off in December, which screw anybody that got it in January, but.
Well, many municipalities then extended that provision at least, and I think the earliest was August that I recall.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any other questions? And then we can just review the two items that do not.
Yeah, these are just a
Require
couple of FYIs, just for your information. In the budget, in past budgets, I think this is the third budget that includes a fire apparatus apprentice program. Been very successful. We actually have no apprentices right now because we hired, I think, all of them. So we wanted to try to come up with a program similar to the fire apprentice program in the police department. Recognizing that police training, and I don't mean to editorialize this, is just the way the certifications work. Police training is much different than fire training, in that fire is a 1 to 3 year process. In our case, it can be a 3-year because of the paramedic part of it, whereas, and so it's a semester by semester course load. Whereas police, you go for 22 weeks straight, you're at the academy, it's a one and done, if you will, and then, of course, you have your ongoing training after that. So to try to do an apprentice program in the police department just would not work mechanically. However, we have been exploring ways that we can improve our recruiting. Our lists, like everybody else in Ohio, if not the nation, is having challenges with our frontline, recruiting frontline employees such as police and fire, but particularly police at this point. And so we are looking at some different techniques and having discussions with the Civil Service Commission on different ways that we can bolster the list so that we have a better, bigger candidate pool from which to evaluate. The police cadet program would be another one of those possible tools that we might look at if we have a unique candidate. It could help us with recruiting a more reflective police department and add to some diversity goals that we have. We do not have a police cadet, not even sure that will be the name, but we anticipate coming to you with a recommendation for a position of that type, and at that point we will be able to discuss in a lot more detail what our program is. We did, in coming up with a training budget this year, we did discuss with the police department how we could kind of start looking at things such as this to build into their budget ongoing. We typically have 2 to 3 police officers that retire every year. We could have as many as 4 to 5 this year. Our department is getting younger with the average age, but we do still have several who can retire in the next months, if not years. So that's one item. Speaking of retirements, in the billing and collections office, we have account representatives, the ladies at the window. We have an account analyst, an account supervisor, and then Ronnie is our fiscal manager. That's just on the billing collection side. Then Ronnie supervises directly the income tax side. The account supervisor is retiring at the end of the month. Ronnie has asked me to leave the account supervisor position vacant for possibly as long as 5 or 6 years, but I'll take it year by year, and instead hire an additional account analyst to help with the processing of the account representative's work. Ronnie would be the supervisor over both operations. And so what you'll see is a double fill in the account analyst and a vacancy in the account supervisor at an annual savings, because the analyst, of course, makes less than the supervisor, including benefits. No actions needed there, but just thought I'd let you know as the Personnel Committee that that's what we're looking at. That's all I have.
Okay. So how would we like to move forward? Are we okay with the hourly and part-time schedule, longevity benefits, and the sick leave hours based on COVID-19? Okay.
I am.
Proceed.
Proceed, okay. We proceed to council. Is there anything else to come before the Personnel Committee? Well, good news, we have the longest Personnel Committee on record now. So we are adjourned.